the community. Right, we need to go back and take a look at Anne and how she got into the SAM industry, what you're going to be doing for 2025. So I guess what we should do is just look at how you got into software asset management. I know it's a little bit like Groundhog Day, given that we did this last week, but yeah, walk us through how you got into software asset management. And I know it wasn't called software asset management when you and I originally got into it.
Yeah, so it was the late 90s, and I just gone on board at Skechers, and I ultimately started buying all of the hardware and software for the company. And at that time, it was only a 100-person company, but it was quickly growing. So in order to get the upgrades that we needed to get, we needed proof of entitlements. So I went to my boss and said, look, boss, we need to start tracking this stuff. I need to start tagging this hardware and categorizing it. And same with the software. And ultimately, it turned into a SAM program. I started using, little programs that were available like Trackit and Centennial to do discovery, and started just creating the process around, these are coming onto the dock. This is what we're going to do when we receive them in. This is what we're going to do when we send things out. And ultimately it paid off because we ended up getting a $30,000 refund from Microsoft when they were kind of double dipping on the OS for volume license users. And from there, I went to Mercury Insurance as a contractor to do their software licensing.
Sorry to cut across you, but going back to that role that you did there, that's quite an interesting role in the sense of, if you do what you were doing for a small organization, you kind of have the all right, you don't get loads of resource. I know you'd have probably made the tea, swept the floor, done all the different things on your own. So it's a great learning curve. But the really cool thing about doing that in a small organization is you can really get your head around the life cycle of an asset. Just as much as me, when you go into a large organization, you'll know that there are disconnects in a business, but trying to put your arms around the whole thing is really difficult. Instead, you kind of have to pick your battles and choose where you can make those wins and then slowly increase your maturity. Whereas in a small organization, it's a real privilege. You probably didn't think at the time, but it opens your eyes up to the whole life cycle of an asset. You were just reeling off what you were doing with the different assets and, labeling it and auditing it and linking it to a license. That's quite hard to do in bigger organizations, isn't it?
Absolutely. And when I got to those bigger organizations, I realized how much harder it was. So I went to, in my next role, it was very ham focused. We were using Alteris, and when I got there, there were maybe 20,000 assets in the repository, and the data wasn't very good. So I, again, out of necessity, I figured out where things were by subnets, and then I tied them to the locations. I found a point person at each location, sent them what I thought they had, sent them a bulk of asset tags. I said, if you got stuff that doesn't have an asset tag, put it in, add it to the list. If there's something that's not in your inventory, let me know that too. And from there,
what response did you get?
I actually had some great champions, and I had some people who are, this isn't my job, I don't need to do this. But what was really cool was when we did get that data in, and they realized that they could look up any asset and know who had it and what monitor was connected to it and where it was. It made their lives so much easier.
And
then we expanded that to the server sub network, and we added all of these custom fields that admin said, these are all the things I need to know: criticality, SLA, application, dependencies. So we built that around the server network, and then we were able to get the same kind of richness of data that made everybody's life so much easier. I mean, how many times have you seen an email come through going, hey, does anybody know who owns this or what this thing does? And it goes back and forth 30 times.
Painful.
And we were able to get rid of all that resource waste by
Yeah.
them just being able to look it up and going, oh, that's where it is. That's what it does.
It's, you know, when you describe that situation, it's such a logical thing to do. It's
Mm.
such common sense, and it's you know, you listen to it, you just think, well, that's standard practice. You know, you should have that. But I don't think I've spoken to a maybe on a handful of times I've spoken with CIOs where they have all of that information in an ITAM platform, and then it correlates back to a CMDB. You know, where they're then linking it with different services. It's just I think it's now become a bit. It's become a lot more. It's got more eyes on it because everyone's talking about FinOps and SaaS and cloud wastage, where you know every month if you're not managing this is going to be painful because you're losing money. I think the sad point is previously the model was different, and it was the publishers were trusting you to pay for the right amount, and
Mm-hmm.
invariably that didn't always happen because it was quite tricky to do unless they had someone like you in place or in situ doing all that work. So I know you and I have spoken a bit about your career. When I've said to you, you know, especially for the platform and what we're doing there, are there any things in software asset management that you really dislike doing? And you've kind of said it on quite a few occasions. No, I love everything. I love every part of SAM. I know you've got your areas that you double down on, but that's genuine, isn't it? You
Yeah.
are one of those people that just loves talking about Sam and doing Sam, whether it's cartoons for Halloween or actually going into organizations and doing the work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my cats actually have QR codes. That's how OCD I am about it. It's like,
I'm
you
not
know,
sure if you
I'm
should admit to that, Anne. Not on video. Did you know this goes on the World Wide Web? You know that, right? And
yeah,
could have hundreds of hits on it.
but
Maybe there's another session there actually. That could be quite an interesting one. QR codes on cats.
actually you can buy them from Amazon. So it's an
Someone's
amazing
making
thing.
money. Yeah,
Well, not only that, when you use that QR code, you can put every bit of information about your pet, whether they have medication or anything. So if somebody actually scans that QR code with their phone, you
that's
can,
clever.
it will alert you that somebody else has scanned your pet.
That's clever.
Yeah.
I mean, we're
It's
going off point a little bit here, but I think so for, you know, I'm sure you have it, you get chipped, you get your dogs or your cats
yeah,
chipped
of
by the
course.
vet. But this is a little bit more friendly and accessible because everyone's got a phone and they can just, you know, if your cat or dog is, look, I didn't know that. Wow,
Yeah.
that is
Yep.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that's so OCD, but just good standard practice, Anne.
Well, my cat gets out. I know where they are. I've got 3 tags on them. I've got a QR code. I've got them microchipped. They have another system called Locator, which is a RF. So it's like playing warm and cold. So if they're close by, you can find them. And they've got an Apple tag. And you
Excellent.
wonder how you get all this on one collar, but it is possible.
Oh, I believe you. I'm with you. I can see the sense in it. Definitely. Um, okay, so let's get back to the work that you're doing now. I know that you have previously been out on your own as a freelancer, haven't you? And I remember
Mm.
talking with you a few months ago about this. Can you, because I think there's two aspects to this video. Firstly, we've got end users. It would be great for them to see you and understand that you're an ambassador, freelancer ambassador on the Abstrato platform, and that's really great. But I think you've also got quite an interesting story in so much as making that decision to go out as a freelancer. It's not easy for everyone, and
Mm.
it takes a certain amount of courage to make the jump and do it. Um, can you share some of the thought process of should I do this, shouldn't I do this? It's my passion, I really love it, but also, you know, I've also got to try and earn a living from it. Can you talk through that kind of process of coming to, yes, I'm going to do this?
Yeah. So it's the last 10 years I've spent in corporate America,
Yeah,
and there is just so much transition, right? So new manager every year, one that's not really skilled in ITAM. So it's constantly a matter of I'm now teaching my manager what we're doing and then convincing them it's a good idea.
yeah,
And there are so many restrictions put on what you can do and how you can do it and what you can say and how you can participate in the community, that it just kind of made sense after a while to say, you know, I'm tired of these restrictions that have been put upon me, and I think I could do a lot of good for people who have gone through what I've gone through, because
Yeah,
I've learned a lot in the last 10 years of how these corporations work, that I think I can help guide somebody who's in that environment and, you know, share my knowledge to the point that you're talking about the training sessions. One of my plans for 2025 is I'm going to be doing what I'm calling, I haven't come up with I haven't finalized the name, but it's either going to be Freaky Flexera Fridays or Fun Flexera Fridays,
I'm sure it'd be
where
creative.
right, where we get Flexera users who are having problems and don't know how to do a particular thing, and we can workshop it
That'd be
and
great.
share that information with Flexera users where they might not have that ability to just sit down with somebody and say, okay, well, this is why it's not working, and let's get that configuration right and see how that's gonna produce the result you need.
That would be super useful. If you want to share it on the platform with us for a wider community, then feel free to do that,
Yeah.
because I think Samit is talking with the rest of the guys internally about what we're going to be doing for next year. That could be a really good one. And I think I hear what you're saying about the reasons for going out as a freelancer. I mean, there are different reasons for people. You know, it could be your work-life balance, it could be financial, it could be, as per, you know, your scenario, maybe knowing a little bit more than your boss and maybe wanting to speak a little freer about, well, actually, look, the situation's like this, and you know, we're here and we need to get over there, and you've got to do A, B, and C before you get over there. And sometimes that can be, it can be quite political, and it's easier if you take a step back and you become a freelancer. um, I think you have to have a certain ability to communicate that message across to the client so that, you know, it's done in a respectful and professional way, and
Mhm.
it's also consumed, it can be consumed easily. I think you'll be great at that. That's probably one of your strongest assets is your communication, I think. Especially on LinkedIn with your cartoons and the Halloween stuff that we've seen already. Um, but I think that's a really big point for anyone that's looking to get into freelancing. I used to be a little bit, when I was an employee, I found that I was a little bit outspoken, and I don't always feel that I'm naturally outspoken, but I'd always have this kind of like this, I want to say passion, but just this feeling, a sense of, no, 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 look, we're doing it the wrong way. It needs to be done like this. And sometimes that would cut across, you know, where I was in my, you know, in my employment or with my boss. But ever since I went freelancing in 2006, and it was a real breath of fresh air for me, because I love going into clients, sitting down, reviewing where they're at, understanding where they wanted to get to, and then helping them get there, you know, as quickly as I could. I mean, I think I've joked with a few other people. If you got me to try and do an SAP license review or IBM, I'd be in tears. I just wouldn't be able
Mhm.
to do it. But I think for you in 2025, whether it's in the Abstrato platform or, you know, via your own client base, you will be exceptionally good at that, because you've got plus 20 years of experience in doing this. You've also been on the client side as well, quite a
Mhm.
majority of that, I think. And that gives you a certain, I want to say empathy. It's probably the wrong word.
No, it's
Maybe it's the
absolutely
right
the
word.
right word.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
absolutely the
yeah.
right word.
Because it's, and I found this sometimes, I found that I can walk in somewhere and go, right, okay, don't do this, do that, don't do this. And then I have to take a step back and think, yeah, you're a consultant and you'll be finished there in 3 or 4 months, but there's
Mhm.
people there and it's their jobs and their livelihoods and they've got relationships to keep. And you can't just go into these meetings and, you know, give it to people in a black and white fashion. I think you've got those communication skills, but you've also got the empathic side where you can appreciate what it's like to be on the client side. So 2025, I know that you enjoy most elements of software asset management, but are there any particular areas that you really love doing or you take a real enjoyment from? Any specific parts of projects? You mentioned Flexera. I know that you've got a passion for Flexera, haven't you? But are there any other things in and around the SAM industry that you're kind of quite interested in at the moment?
I think the thing that that really attracted me was your bringing FinOps and ITAM together, because I think that is
Yeah.
so ignored. And in my last year at NBC, I finally found we had a FinOps guy, and I had no idea he had been
Mm.
there for a year. So we got together, and I said, "Well, I've actually got the inventory for the stuff that you're doing the right sizing for." And he was only focused on the hardware side. And I
Yeah.
showed him all of the data that we had accumulated that we could tie to all of those assets and how we could make his picture a little bit broader. And he hadn't been looking at the software side. And, it's like, okay, you're making reservations for non-dev, non-prod systems. Is that really the right way to go? Should those be on all the time?
Yeah.
Um, and we started to really like pick it apart and create Power BIs based on the hardware that was on there, the software was on there, what the costs were over the last, few years, and how they had either gone up or down per the changes. So it was looking at the data in a whole new way that he hadn't even thought of. So
No.
I thought that was kind of cool. And I think the biggest thing for me is bringing all of that data in that people don't even realize you need, and then building that into a BI and making it really dynamic so you can slice and dice it and see it from different angles.
That's so for me personally, and we haven't spoken about this. This isn't teed up, but that's where I absolutely believe we need to. If you take ITAM and FinOps, they're aiming for the same things, but they do things a bit differently because they are different. You're talking about on-prem and a hybrid mixture, and then you've kind of got the pure FinOps guys, but we do have to start working together. And I also think ITSM as well, to some degree, from a CMDB perspective and services. But for me, that's where over the next few years, I'm really excited about that. And I think we had the similar conversation from the last video that I was supposed to record, but didn't. Talking with some of the FinOps guys, and they are, by their own admission, they're pure heads down technical engineering, and they've never really heard. One of the guys, Anderson, is a lovely chap, and he was doing some presentations and workshops for FinOps X in Barcelona, the conference a few weeks ago. Really knows his onions, and I was talking to him about what we're doing on the ITAM side. He's another ambassador similar to you, and he went, "Oh, Steve, this ITAM thing, genuinely, what is it? Where can I learn some more about it?" And I went,
Mm.
"Right, okay." And I got to talk with a few of the staff, and he came back and went, this is really cool, powerful stuff. You guys have been doing this for years. You've got standards, you've got frameworks. If we could just turn it into something a little bit more real time. And that's kind of went, oh, that's the nirvana, but that's really difficult in the ITAM world. That's kind of like, and he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, we need to take some leaps out of your book because you guys are all about the real time stuff, if you can get the context. But I think the more we can get people such as yourselves and then Anderson from the FinOps world sharing and collaborating, it will be really powerful when we start taking that as a platform and individuals into organizations because it's definitely needed. Definitely needed.
Yeah, and it's the same with SaaS. So if you look at
Yeah.
SaaS in a similar way, I mean, you're getting things that aren't necessarily leaving footprints in your environment. You've got to either set up APIs or manually download the information. But once you start to integrate that information with your ITAM, that's when you can start to like break apart by departments or business units and say, this is the business unit that is using the most. This is where it's costing the most. This is where there's the most waste and how we can consolidate. In one environment I was in, Smart Sheets, there were like 5 or 6 different portals, different owners. They all had different authentication methods going on. Some were SSO, some were not. But if we had looked at them and consolidated them into one and then created individual admins for each unit, we would have had a more complete, probably more efficient,
Yeah.
footprint for smart sheets. But, again, political, right? Everybody's got their own budget. They don't necessarily want to play in each other's sandbox. So it becomes a bit of a challenge, but ultimately it's a challenge that would benefit the company financially, and it would take the burden off of those individuals that are trying to like keep up with their full-time job and manage their SaaS environments.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think the point you raised around SaaS, it's interesting. If you look at clouds and you look at software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, the software as a service is the biggest, I think, and the fastest growing sector of cloud. But it's also the messiest. So to your point, you can have an organization and they've got hundreds, thousands of SaaS applications, all with different logins and portals and accesses, right? So it's crazy frenetic and hard to manage, but it's the most expensive area if you get it wrong. The FinOps guys, infrastructure as a service and platform is super important, but in the main, and I'm generalizing here, you've got three hyperscalers: GCP, AWS, and Microsoft. The data's relatively clean in there. Okay, it might not be tagged and they might not have contextual understanding, but when you look at that SaaS environment, it's growing, and it's growing at such a rate because it's so. I was just about to come up with an oxymoron. Software isn't easy or cheap to build, but there are 4 or 5 times more software applications out there than there were in 2010. Yeah. So the point you make around SaaS is, I think it's a bit of a sleeping giant with a lot of organizations, because I'd be interested to get your sense on this. In small startups like tech and cloud first that have been incorporated in the past 3 or 4 years, they're all about the SaaS and they get it. They get it because they've got private equity firms or angel investors that are really quite tight on the management of all of the baseline costs or the operating costs. In large, complex enterprise organizations, SaaS just seems to fall down the back of the sofa because it circumnavigates procurement teams, it circumnavigates IT teams, and there's no one person that's responsible apart from Jane or John, who have bought it from their own budget in their own team, right? Because they can just consume it quite easily. I don't know if you've had that experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you're talking about going from a smaller environment where their purchasing is most likely centralized. And then you get to the larger organizations where, again, every business unit has its own budget. They're doing their own thing. They're not really checking in. There's no governance around how to bring software into the environment. And that's where cyber comes in too, because it really lends to the vulnerability that these applications may be bringing into the organization. So you really have to look at the different people, their needs. And when you get to a larger organization, that's where app rationalization needs to come in. So whether they're buying it with a P card or they're buying it, with a PO, that should be somehow captured in your finance environment. And when you work with the finance team and you get all of those spend reports in, that's when you start to need to look at the rationalization. And it's not just saying, okay, we've got 5 of the same application, right? We're just going to settle on one. No, you've got to talk to all the different teams and understand why they're using that particular one and what their affinity is to it. And if you could bring it down to 1 or 2 and have everybody be happy, then you have a strategy in place. But that's the problem, is nobody's talking to each other. And I think that's become the biggest thing. The bigger the company is, the less people are talking to each other.
Yeah, especially on SaaS.
They're all just focused on what they need to do and how quickly they need to do it. When you work in a dynamic environment like an entertainment company, I mean, what graphics needs versus what, finance needs are 2 totally different things. And you can't say, all right, well, we're just gonna we're just going to take away graphics because they are the bread and butter of your organization. They are creating content, and you need them to move very quickly and very dynamically and give them the tools they need to be able to produce the content. Whereas finance, they may be a little bit more, bendable. They may be a little bit more pliable. They don't have to move as quickly. So different needs. And that's where user
That's
profiling
such a
comes
good
in.
point. So that last point just reminds me of how you can have a certification program, you can have a framework, but if you just don't appreciate the sector that you're working in, you can really fall foul and not. I'm going to tell you, I'll try and tell you stories in a very short period of time, but like 20, 30 years ago, I was doing this certification program and it was all about compliance. And there were large organizations, different sectors. We had MOD, so Ministry of Defence, and I had to go to this one site, and it was like a governmental site, and it was full of scientists, nuclear scientists. I remember talking with the guy about the certification program, and he just kind of said, I think he said something like, we've got over 300 scientists, and they can basically do whatever they want. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, that they are the gods of this outfit. All of them are on 20, 30-year contracts. So even if they downloaded a piece of software that they weren't supposed to have, you couldn't sack them anyway because they've got contracts for 30 years. It was the most bizarre situation I'd ever come across. But your story there between finance and graphics is such a good point, and it really is. You have to, but that's that whole kind of empathic side where you understand and you've got a certain empathy towards the organization and the different kind of nuances they might run through, right?
Yeah, I worked in medical for a little while, and with medical, that's even worse because now you've got doctors who can
Yeah,
buy applications. And I remember
yeah,
one that was bought for the emergency room, and it was really cool technology. It was basically, tracking a patient from room to room to room. The
yeah.
problem was the protocol that had to be used for that was not in the emergency room. And I had to work with the security guys in order to get that enabled and, work with the doctors as well as the emergency room staff to make sure that we could get this application working because the doctor already bought it. We had to put it
Ouch.
in place. And we ultimately got it working the way that they wanted it to, but it was a lot of negotiating with different teams in order to make it happen.
Yeah, so I genuinely think, the past 10 years or so of you doing that end user role is going to help you no end with your clients. I think I owe you an apology because the last time we did the video, I was commenting and complimenting you on your fire that you had, and I was saying I need to get rid of the Abstrato backdrop, and then because I've got my own office. It's outside. It's in like a little kind of corner of the garden, but it's cold and damp, right? So I come inside. I use the dining room. It's got a fireplace, big table. I can go and get a cup of tea, coffee whenever I want. So I've forgotten, but next time we do a video, I'll put my fire on as well. Bit too
Right.
warm in the UK right now.
Right
Right.
now, this is an A-frame and I'm on the top floor and it's just cold. It's just cold up here.
Oh, really?
If I don't
What
have,
temperature have you got at the moment in California? We should have said
oh,
where you're from. We didn't
yeah,
even talk about, I mean,
sorry.
people have probably guessed that you are somewhere in America.
In a mountain.
Um,
Yeah, no. Right now the temperature outside is 55. So for that, Fahrenheit.
yeah,
Yeah.
9
So
Celsius, I think, 10.
yeah, now you get into this house. Now drop that another 10 degrees because there is no
Ooh.
insulation in this house, as you can tell.
Ooh, right, okay. Well, you're doing well in the t-shirt then, I'd say. Toughing it out.
I'm toughing it out.
All right, listen, I think we've come to you and I have done very well to get to 30 minutes and be on time because I was just about to say that you can talk, but it's normally me that goes over. But we have hit our 30-minute mark. So I'm hoping that we've done a great introduction to you, that the Abstrato community have kind of had a view into Anne and what she's about and what she could do. We will do other videos on, we should probably do one on SaaS and maybe incorporate Flexera, actually. That could be an
Yeah,
idea.
actually SaaS, Flexera and SaaS, Flexera and FinOps. The new
Yeah,
Flexera 1, where they've brought in the cloud optimization piece, is really spectacular. So,
let's do that. Have you
yeah,
actually, hold on, before we close, have you seen the video between J.R. Stormont and Jim Ryan? Because we put it on it came out a few weeks ago,
the
and they were
fireside
talking
chat.
about, yeah, it was like a fireside chat. So we put it on our platform. I think that could be something that we do, maybe ITAM and FinOps, or maybe SaaS. We'll do one of those.
Yeah. So
You
I
can
have
lead it
become a
for us.
Flexera partner, which is fantastic. I'm waiting for my onboarding with that. And once I can get a demo system, which is what I'm working towards, then I can do some really cool demos of what the Flexera platform can do in relation to SaaS and cloud.
Great. Well, we'll make sure that when we go live with the platform, that Flexera capability, we actually get that documented for you. Because I think on the platform we have segments. You're either FinOps, and if you're in FinOps, it's GCP at AWS or Microsoft. On the SAM and ITAM side, we break it down by publisher. But then also, do you do process and policy? Do you do project management? Might be an idea to then bracket the different technologies. Anyway, we digress. We're going over. I will end the recording here, and then we can complete it.